Hello and welcome to the West London Sport QPR podcast. New intro music, same old faces, I'm afraid. I'm working on that. Bear with me on that one. Those old faces are myself, David McIntyre, and Ian McCullough. We're still minus Kevin Gallen, who we're hopeful will be back with us very soon. He's on his way back from holiday right now, I think. Lots to talk about from the Sheffield United game on Saturday. Some good, some bad things came up. We're going to go straight to the good things, the very good things, actually, I think. And that would be the performances of Dembele and Saito on their debuts. Ian, pretty impressive.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's without Ilias Chair, Rangers have looked a little bit light on creativity in the West Brom game, and also very much in the second half of the Cambridge game. And Dembele, given his first start, played 64 minutes and was excellent. He was really good. He's I think, as Dan Bennett said on this, we did a pod last week, that he's not blessed with express pace, but he's still quick enough, and the pockets of space he picks up, and his ability to kind of beat a man and play in tight spaces and look at threat for the whole game that he was on the field. He really was Rangers' kind of lone warrior in many ways, because no one else was really doing much. Lucas Anderson went off injured, but prior to that, the game was sort of passing him by a little bit. I mean, it was a very, very fast game, very, very, very intense, very sort of end to end, ball going from one end of the field to the other. But Dembele did really well. Tired a little bit in the second half, went off, and Saito come in for the last sort of 20, 25 minutes and hit the ground running. He was really good. Really direct, great first touch. Really, I mean, the second goal, he did really well for that. I mean, it's a tremendous pass from Jake Clark-Salter from out the back over the top of two Sheffield United defenders, and he's picked him out beautifully. But his first touch, his ability just to kind of, and then accelerate into space, and then pick his moment to kind of square a pass for Lyndon Dykes, who, in all fairness to him, produced a fantastic finish from the edge of the box. But yeah, very exciting, and good to see. And it's, I mean, we said this privately, so off camera, Rangers, this is what Rangers have needed, and I think there's no sort of, we're not saying anything that's a state secret there. It's fairly obvious to see that they needed to do something to improve in a creative sense. And I think the early signs are very good, albeit after just one game.
One game, but I mean, Dembele, I've been quite critical of QPR's transfer dealings generally over a long period, and I've been sceptical of some of the signings this summer, and they'll take time. Obviously, there are one or two other players there that understandably are going to take time to adapt, so we'll find out about them. But Dembele is an exciting player and an exciting signing. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And Saito, I mean, another thing QPR have had a tendency to do, Ian, is really overhype players, and maybe everyone gets a little bit excited after one glance, something like that. But I have to say on Saito, I feel like I've seen enough already to know that he is of a certain level. It doesn't mean it's going to work out for him. It doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be a success in the longer term, but he's definitely got something. He's strong, he's quick. Like you said, he's got great first touch. He's very direct. So we can already see that he is up to the level in terms of his ability. How he'll adapt in the longer term, there are many other ingredients that will have to be there. But both of them do look very, very exciting signings. And like we've been saying, they're exactly what Rangers need. I mean, we were talking about on the last podcast about Chris Willock, and I was saying, I like a lot of what Willock did. But I just thought that Rangers needed, players that were stronger, quicker, more consistent, more robust. And those two are examples of players like that, where, they're not going to do it every week, but they've just got something about them where they will consistently go for the throat of the opposition. It's their instinct. And it's much needed. It gives Rangers a threat down both sides. They're very unpredictable players in what they do. They've got great variety to them, And I'm looking forward to seeing how they do. And I think Rangers needed it particularly after losing Sinclair Armstrong. I think was that kind of player who very different to those two, but arguably not as effective as those two at what they do. But for all his shortcomings, Armstrong, he had that ability to worry defenders, excite the fans, raise the tempo generally, and Rangers badly needed other players who could do that without him. So I really like what I've seen there. I think going forward, those two, they're going to be key players, and they can surely only get better, and potentially good long-term signings as well.
Yeah, I will say as well that since the arrival of the two of them, Paul Smith has seemed to up his game a little bit. He played really well against Cambridge, and the cynic in you can say, well, it's a League One side. He's a League One player, etc., etc. But he came off the bench against Sheffield United and did really well. And he's a very likable guy, very likable player. He's very honest. What you see is what you get. And it's almost like the threat of competition has he's lifted his game a level, which is encouraging to see. And he played his part in that comeback as well on Saturday. He was very good. And let's be frank about it. It's a tough place to go, Sheffield United. And that's the thing that gets you with Saito. Sometimes you get players, they come in. We've seen it in cup games. Players, someone like Mbakoto a few years back, who played his first game against Northampton, I think, in the cup, and looked really good and really lively. And after they showed it in patches, not really consistently, and didn't really work out. To come off the bench against albeit it's probably one of the worst Premier League teams in modern times. They're still well resourced, and they've still got some very good, championship level players in that team. To come off the bench like Saito did and just hit the ground running and really cause them, all sorts of problems. It was really encouraging to see.
Yeah, and I think another thing about those two, looking at them, is I think it could potentially be good for Lyndon Dykes as well. Now, as you know, Dykes is a player that I'm not really rated, and kind of formed a view on quite soon after he came to QPR, even though that can be unfair, obviously, when a player's signed. But for me, I've always doubted whether he kind of had enough about him. And I think the thing with Dykes, I often hear people say about Dykes that, you just need to get the ball into the box towards him. Now, I don't know about that. I mean, whoever you play up front, whatever human being you put in the box, statistically, the more you get the ball into box to them, the better chance they've got of scoring. But I think that the suggestion was that, he get the ball in the box. It's what he's good at. It plays to his strengths. I don't think it is. I don't think he's a great finisher. I think he misses chances because he's not technically great. I think the way to get, and I've long felt this, the way to get the best out of Dykes, or to put it another way, the way to get him contributing most of the team, is to get players beyond him and into the box. And that's what Rangers haven't been doing. Cher and Willock, again, nice players, but they like doing what they do. They link up well when they're close together, kind of around the edge of the box. That's not really Dykes' strength either. What Rangers needed was for someone to, go and attack those spaces when he draws defenders out. It just hasn't happened that way for him at QPR. And at Sheffield United, you saw that, and you saw that with his goal, where Saito finds himself in a very advanced position. He's going at a defender, he cuts it back, and Dykes comes onto the ball to strike it, which is what you want. That's more like it. Not a case of getting the ball into his feet, or even in the air to him, because he's not that effective in the air either, I don't think. It's that coming onto the ball and that finish. I think that's more up Dykes' street, and he may get more goals that way. But even if he doesn't get more goals, it's just that ability of the team to have players who get beyond Dykes and into and around the box. That's something that's been lacking too often. And if they play that way, I'd actually say, although I've not been Dykes' greatest fan, I'd actually say that he is the best striker at the club for that role. And in fact, I'd probably still be saying it even if they had Armstrong still, who I like. So I think it could do a lot for Lyndon Dykes as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I think just following in for what you said from Dykes, it's also, I think it will benefit the other strikers as well. I mean, there isn't a striker in the game that doesn't want the ball in the box. That's what you want, isn't it? The ball's going to come in sort of like where it did for the second goal. We're in that sort of area. That's can only help Frey and Cella as well. I mean, he was better when he came off the bench. Actually, Cella, he did okay. He looked a little bit sharper. I mean, again, you got to give these new guys, time, haven't you? It's there's a lot of hype about because where he's played, he went to the Euros and that, but it's a big step up. I think going from the Swiss League into the Championship and moving country, all these kind of other things. It's going to take time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you sign 5 or 6 players of that. We said this on the last podcast, where I felt that it was a risk that Rangers were taking and a big challenge for the manager, arguably bigger than even the one he faced last season, to get so many players coming in from different parts of the world, different environments into that team, and to get the team to gel. So you're never going to get a situation where they all hit the ground running. So if 1 or 2 can do it, then that's great. It doesn't all have to come together at the same time. It doesn't have to work instantly, but enough of it needs to work for them to get points in the bag and get the season up and running. And if 2 attacking players like that either side of a striker, then that's more than they've had before. And it's, like I said to you last time out, I just felt like although the Chair Willock thing was the strongest aspect of QPR's play, and I felt Gareth was wrong to rip it up and Marty was right to bring it back, I still think in the longer term, Rangers needed to move beyond that. I think that there was a ceiling there. I think they needed to be more dynamic, quicker, stronger, and it looks like they've got 2 guys there who really, really fit that bill. So it was good stuff. I like both of them. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they get on. Varane, obviously, he's found the going tough initially. I don't think that's a surprise, to be perfectly honest. I did expect that, and we did say that before. I know that the manager's looking to bring at least another midfielder in. I mean, you like Isaac Hayden, Ian. He's still potentially available. He's been mentioned. I like him as well, but I think you're a particular fan of his and would perhaps like to see him or someone like him back there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think in midfield, I think you do need a bit of size in this division. Modern day midfields now, you see, even the top teams are all physically strong. I think that was something Cifuentes identified very quickly last season, where he offloaded Andre Giselle and brought in Isaac Hayden, and Hayden was excellent last year. I think the role he played in helping QPR stay out shouldn't be underestimated. I think he's a terrific professional. Sets good standards, good around the dressing room. Played well on the park, did very well. But if it's not him, I'd like to see someone of, that kind of similar sort of profile, for want of a better word. Someone come and do that job. Then with Hayden, on the flip side, he doesn't score many goals. He's a very defensively minded player. And maybe it just was a case of he was good for the job at the time of keeping Rangers in the Championship. Perhaps they're looking elsewhere for someone that's perhaps a little bit younger, with some resale value. And obviously he's at Newcastle. He's on enormous money. And he's got 2 years, I believe, left on his contract in Newcastle. So, I mean, despite having all their Saudi millions, they're not going to pay him out 2 years' money. And he's not going to, no footballer on earth is going to accept a payoff, less than what they're owed. So I'm assuming he's just in a bit of limbo at the minute, and he'll end up on loan somewhere else. Whether or not it'll be at QPR, I think the longer it goes, I think the less chance it is of happening. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm with you on that, mate. I mean, I like Hayden as a player. Rangers wanted him for years before they eventually brought him in, and I can see why. And I agree with you that he did, an important job last year. I do think a couple of things about him though. The first is he's a good defensive midfielder. He did a good job in front of the defence, which is kind of, that's his game. For someone with his background and of his pedigree, having been at Arsenal and obviously played in the Premier League and played at a high level in the Championship too, I don't think his distribution is very good. I think his passing can be quite poor at times. But I think the main objection really I'd have to Hayden or a player of that ilk is that you've already got Sam Field, who I think is suited to that role of screening the back four. You've already got Colback. So they've got two so-called number sixes. Perhaps you could argue there's an imbalance there because they're both left-footed, and I get that. But I think there's enough there. I think they need someone further forward, more like a 7 or an 8, which they're more likely to do. I think the thing that you bring another defensive midfielder in, and I think you then potentially lose something with Sam Field, who I'd have in that role. I think the thing with Field, I think Field's done well. Obviously, he's done well the last couple of seasons. But what I'd say about Sam Field is that I think to some extent just a little mini reset is maybe needed for him at the moment. He's not done anything wrong, but I just get the impression with Field, I said, just a little reset for him. And for me, that reset would be just re-establishing him as primarily a defensive midfielder. He can still get up and in and around the box and join the play, and he's got good attributes in that sense. But I never agreed with Mick Beale with the idea that he could perhaps be a more advanced player. I think it takes something away from him and the team. And I don't see a point in bringing in another 6 when, as I said, I'd like to just re-establish Field in that role. And if he has a second position, Ian, I still see him as an auxiliary left-sided centre half rather than a more attacking player. So I wouldn't bring in someone, because I think that I'd want Sam Field for that role.
Yeah, my thinking behind it as well, Dave, was just the number of games you have.
Yeah.
I mean, we got Colback in there. I mean, Colback was, as much as Dembele and Saito were instrumental in the comeback, Colback coming down at half time was the biggest difference. All of a sudden, in midfield they were stronger and faster and using the ball better and weren't getting overrun as they were in the first half. And then he gets himself sent off.
Sending off was ridiculous, wasn't it? It's not the first time
it's not the first time he gets booked every other game. You're going to lose him probably in a season. You're going to lose him 7 or 8 games. And with Varane, I mean, I said on Twitter the other day, and of course, Twitter being its usual nuanced place, I got hammered by some people by saying maybe that Varane should be, just taking out the spotlight a little bit and put in the reserves. That wasn't just to bomb him out. It was more kind of like he's just come in from another country. He's a young boy. And he didn't just struggle against Sheffield United. He struggled against Cambridge as well. And doesn't mean he's a bad player. It doesn't mean he's rubbish. It doesn't mean he should be bombed out. It doesn't mean he's a terrible signing. I mean, you go back to Ali Forlan, who was an excellent player for QPR. He didn't do much for the first 4 or 5 months when he came to QPR. He was very, it just takes time, doesn't it? It takes time. And I think I think some ways you can do a little bit more damage to good by just kind of throwing him out there. He's obviously it's a very protracted transfer, him coming in. He's very kind of like everyone thinks he's going to be, the next Zidane. You know what I mean? He's because he's French and his brother played for Man United and has been in the French World Cup team. And he's not at the moment. He's not ready yet. He's not ready for the Championship at the moment, I think. You can either on the bench and just throw him in and blood him in gently, but he's got to be one for the future, I think. And I think just having someone else to come in and just sort of play that role, bring him in, your game here and there and use him, but don't just throw him out there as your number 6 and go, right, sink or swim. Because I do worry that at the moment, I don't think he's ready for the Championship. That's my own personal opinion from what I've seen. But that doesn't mean he's a rubbish player. It doesn't mean he's got no technical ability. He looks like he's got a lot to learn for me at the moment. Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing with Varane, I think you're right. But again, without wanting to labour the point, I bring it back to Field. Varane may turn out to be a very good player. But I look at it, I like managers and clubs who are a little bit more loyal. And I'd look at someone like Field and I'd say, well, this guy's done it for me numerous times. So he is going to be my first choice. And I'm going to have him as a fixture of my midfield. Again, I'll talk about that reset for Field. I just feel like Rangers need to bring him back to that kind of role where he is seen as that kind of player, particularly when you are bringing in different players, again, from different settings. I think you need to go back to what you know. What do we know? We know that Field can do the job over long periods of a season as a defensive midfielder. So we know that. So it makes sense to just put him in that role and make him a fixture as much as you can. You've got the two centre-backs, as long as they're still together, you know that they'll deliver. So again, having a field in front of those two, you're solid, and then you can build your little bits and pieces around there and play Varane sparingly, and whether he goes for a spell, you know, in the reserves, as you say, or off the bench or whatever. So again, you know, I think I'm not convinced that they need to bring in a player in that role, and I don't think they will. I think they look more at sort of number 8. You know, the few options that are there. Nicholas Madsen is, I have to be honest, I didn't think they'd do that one. That isn't who I thought that they'd end up bringing in. I thought they'd bring in someone else, but they are. It looks like they're going to go ahead and do that one. You know, a more attacking player, which again I think they need. I think they need a player in that mould. My knowledge of players like that simply comes down to whether other clubs have been looking at them or not. And he's on the radar of a few. A few have looked at him. The view seems to be that he's a nice player, that his outstanding attribute is his range of passing, and he can score goals. But a disclaimer there that that's a very different league to playing in the Championship, and goals might be harder to come by in that division. But certainly his passing and you know, eye for a goal, perhaps not physically that strong, certainly not quick. So it'll be interesting to see how a player like that, who isn't as kind of physically robust, it seems, is going to do in the Championship. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, and the need to maybe bring someone in further forward, because that's where I think they're lacking, particularly if they're going to have a more sort of dynamic front line. You know, again, you go back to the sort of field, as I'd like to see it, field in front of the defence. You've got the more dynamic back line, and then that makes your midfielder in between those lines all the more important, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I will say again, if Madsen does sign, I mean, he's playing for a team in the top league in Belgium. You know, he's not coming from second flight. He's, you know, Westerlo, who you know, had a good start to the season, I believe. I think they're kind of, after 4 games, they're near the top. You know, and it's been quite a fertile signing ground for a lot of clubs, particularly in the Premier League, the Belgian league. In Brentford, the guy that Brentford signed for a lot of money, the striker who's now injured, he come from a Belgian league. And I think as well with Danish players, they fit into English football quite well. By and large, historically, they come in and, you know, can deal with the physical side of it. So that hopefully shouldn't be too much of a problem. On paper, it seems a very exciting signing. I'm not going to lie; I've never seen the man play, so I don't know. But you know, looking at what the stats are, you know, you'd say, well, yeah, he looks a good signing. Good age as well, and it seems to be a very imbalanced. Everyone they're signing is in that sort of 22 to 25-year-old bracket, which makes sense, I guess. You're kind of hoping that younger players, there's some resale value there down the line. So yeah, if it comes off, then you know, I think it'd be a good deal.
Yeah, interesting one. I mean, I think the point about the Belgian league is it's not a standard. It's a good standard. It's certainly an equivalent standard to what you find in the Championship. It's just a different league. And again, you can see a player in Varane who's obviously going to have to adapt to that. He's come from a different league. It's a different style. So again, like you, I've not seen the guy play. I'm only going by people I know who have seen and what their thoughts on him have been. They're people who are paid to do this for a living, to form views on players, and that is the kind of view on him. Talented, excellent range of passing, likes the goal, but isn't quick, isn't strong. And I think you put a player like that in the Championship, there has to be a question mark over them, just given the nature of the Championship. But again, like I said before, said it in the last podcast, doesn't have to work straight away. You bring a player like that on a decent level of contract with an option to extend that contract. He doesn't have to do it straight away. He only has to, as long as you're doing okay and you're picking up points as a team, a player like that at that age, he only has to come in. He had 10 very good games, nice. Next season, can he get 15, 20? and then you go on from there. So it doesn't all have to click.
And I think that has to be with what about labouring the point about Varane as well.
Yeah,
expecting too much too soon is wrong. You kind of just let the boy learn, let him kind of grow, let him. I mean, Martin Fuentes knows more about the player than I do. He sees him every day in training. So, but I mean, it's noticeable, the way he hooked him at half time. I think just a word on that, actually. I mean, he said himself, he admitted he kind of got the team wrong. And I was up at Sheffield on Bramall Lane on Saturday I actually went in the away end, and it was really, nice to actually speak to people, and people getting people's views on certain things. And I was talking to a guy on the walk on the way out. He said, much as we love Marty, that I think you got that one wrong. You set the team up wrong, and I think you did. But good managers noticed that, didn't they? Rectified it at half time, changed it, and got the result. And that's, I guess, on one hand, he got it wrong, but that's a negative. On the positive, he rectified it. And managers sometimes do that, don't they? They'll kind of think, I'll give it till sort of 10, 15 minutes in the second half, and then I'll change it. But being proactive and changing at half time, it's not an easy thing to do for a player to be hooked at half time, but I think needs must at the time, and it was the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot to like about Marty, but I think top of my list, what I really like about him is his temperament, and I think that's part of the reason why he's been relatively successful so far. He's just got that temperament. He doesn't get carried away when things are good, and equally, he doesn't change when things are bad. And also, what I like about him is that he accepts the limitations of the job. And I talk about this a lot, where people look at the manager as some kind of focal point, like he's, holding a joystick on the sidelines and can determine, whether you attack or defend, that kind of thing. A lot of these guys are just hostages to fortune. They roll the dice, they try things. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And what I like about him is he's just relaxed, but he knows that he doesn't pretend to, be something that he's not. He knows that he can affect certain things, and some things you just try and it doesn't work. But that's his great strength. He's got a lot of strengths, but that's the one thing about him that really stands out for me, is the fact that he's just so level-headed. If it goes well, he doesn't let it go to his head, and if it goes badly, he's just willing to just shrug it off, learn from it, and maybe make a change here or there. I think it's stood him in good stead so far, and I think this season, particularly with all those players coming together, and the way he's had the kind of players brought in from all sides, he'll need that. And so far, so good. And I mean, there was a lot wrong in that first half at Sheffield United, but again, it's his ability to adapt. He can make a change or two. He doesn't panic. And I'll be interested to see how Varane does. But it's a tough league for someone like that to come in and hit the ground running in. No doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, as well, he's, again, I think what's noticeable, he's about Fuentes, there is a kind of a humility to him there as well, whereas, obviously there was a very, joyful away end at the end, and the players were there and they're singing the manager's name, but he's very much like letting the players go forward, where you see a lot of managers, this whole holding hands and bowing and kind of he's not for all that. It's very much the players did it. I'm just, and that's the players, that fits in well with the player as well. I'd imagine as a player, you probably like that, didn't you? There's nothing. Yeah,
we've come across a few managers who aren't like that, haven't we?
Oh yes, naming no names.
But yeah. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks, mate, and we'll catch up again soon. Hopefully, this time with Kevin. And thanks for listening, everyone. And do feel free to drop your comments. We always read those. We like your thoughts, and we'll catch you again soon.